Fletcher. Now sit back and prepare to be entertained.
Greetings and welcome to the Dripping Bucket Podcast with your hosts, Krystle Matar and myself, Michael R Fletcher. Today, we are joined by Anna Smith Spark, author of the absolutely insanely amazing Empires of Dust trilogy, A Woman of the Sword and A Sword of Bronze and Ashes, and all-around fantastic human and author. Welcome.
Oh, thank you.
It's always very charming to see other writers when we generally compliment their body of work squirm so much with the most basic of compliments.
You're acceptable. It's like, shucks.
Nobody's ever said that before. So Anna, thanks so much for jumping on with us. And I guess I totally lost my train of thought. That's how professional we are. Fletcher, take it away.
Okay. So, we were talking earlier about just chatting about your sort of how you got into publishing, where it started for you.
Yes.
So Empires of Dust was your first published book, correct?
Yes. In fact, so this book, God's Broken Knives, was the first thing I ever wrote as an adult. So, the first piece of fiction I ever wrote as an adult. So yes, I have a extremely unusual publishing journey, in fact, in that I went from not having written any fiction as an adult to starting writing then turned into chapter 2 of God Broken Knives. In less than a year, I had written the first draft of God Broken Knives. I got an agent overnight. I then had a short wait for a publishing deal, and then got a major publishing deal for a trilogy. So it kind of peaked early.
Yeah. Know that you could be in a valley.
Anna, how was your publishing journey? Oh, it was easy. You write a book.
Yeah, I just
you get an agent. You get a trilogy deal with one of the biggest publishers on the planet.
Although,
boom, done. All right. I hope you enjoyed our podcast.
So I was fortunate enough to receive an arc for the one that you co-wrote together. And my husband promptly stole it from me, even though it's meant to be for me, because he's a fan of both of you. And he was reading your bios on the back, and Fletcher's bio is basically, I'm just some guy. And yours is, I'm extremely qualified to be here. And so, you say that it was fast, but you spent a lot of time laying quite a foundation in writing and art. You guess.
Yes.
Only
no,
a BA.
That's true. Yes. No. I mean, kind of. The really long, complicated backstory is that I had this incredibly privileged upbringing, being surrounded by poets and artists and playwrights and novelists, and then so I was kind of like, I spent every summer we go and help out at a Friends Literature Festival, and loads of my parents' friends are writers and artists, and blah. And I did do my undergraduate was in classics and ancient history, and my special subject, Alexander the Great, and I had this absolutely amazing year. I was at university where I spent the whole day studying the Iliad and Alexander the Great, and then pretty much every evening we were then doing D&D. So it was absolutely awesome.
That sounds exactly like the sort of foundation for fantasy writers that we expect. So even though the actual drafting process was quick, there's a lot of years.
There was a lot. There was. Yes, and I've got yes, I have. In fact, I do actually have. I have a PhD in Victorian occultism. Which, it's very cool. But but then after that, so I did loads of writing as a teenager, fiction writing as well as university and stuff. But then actually when I was about around the time I got to university, I just stopped writing fiction completely. And actually, so I did all this.
In your defense, you were pretty busy.
Yes, I was pretty busy actually. Yeah, but I didn't do any fiction writing, and actually, really bizarrely, even though I was, so I did a PhD in things, but I kind of felt I couldn't write a book. I kind of felt. I actually said to Jen Williams one evening, I confessed this to her, and she just thought this was hilarious. So I kind of felt if I started writing a book, like the sky would open, and sort of, particularly sort of, a female writer about my age, like someone like Jen Williams, would sort of appear like God, kind of pointing at me, like, "Oh, ha, ha, what do you think you are doing? You think you can write a book?" I mean, it sounds really stupid, but it was really genuinely, I found it really, really hard. And for several years, I only read like really old books, because it felt like kind of, okay, if you're reading like War and Peace, I mean, it's an amazing book. It is such an amazing book, and the idea that anyone could ever write, another War and Peace or another Middlemarch or something, is just, you can't really say, "Oh, I'm such a failure because I've never written a book as good as Middlemarch or War and Peace," or so that kind of felt all right. But reading like a fantasy novel by a person about my age just felt like someone who I can imagine visualize as a human being has done this, and yet I cannot do this.
Yeah.
So, and it felt
it
really, really awful, really, really hard and painful, and kind of, just real sense of like, why am I such a failure that I can't do this? Even though I wasn't trying, it wasn't like I was sitting down and somehow like cannot write, cannot physically type. I just wasn't. But I was like, I just can't. There is no way I would ever be able to write a book. And then one day, I just started writing, and then within
and you were not raptured away.
And then and then kind of
Jen Williams didn't smite you.
No, Jen Williams did not smite me. And then sort of overnight, I had this sort of incredibly prestigious agent. It was all it was all kind of strange, but it does make it. It was harder than it sounded. It was a lot more painful than it sounded.
Was there something that sort of happened, some sort of like cracking moment that pushed you to start writing? Like, what was the, was there, like one day you're not writing a book, but the next day you are? Was like, what kind of triggered that?
I think actually the thing that changed me was getting an autism diagnosis. So I was diagnosed in my 20s with dyslexia and dyspraxia. And my spelling is absolutely appalling. My typing is actually appalling. Dyslexia, most people know about. Dyspraxia is issues around physical coordination. So I can't drive because I can't cope with gears changes and reversing and all the kind of stuff that you have to be aware, and looking in the mirrors and all of that kind of. There's no way. I've tried parallel parking, reverse parking, you can't, and I just cannot do it. So I can't. There's loads of stuff I can't do. Sorry.
Kind of the multitasking that takes place with driving.
And physical stuff.
Okay. That makes sense.
So I'm really bad at sports. I have never hit a tennis ball with a tennis racket once in my life. I realised.
Neither have I.
A colleague at work was cheerfully talking about tennis, and I realised that I was forced to do tennis lessons at school. And obviously there are occasions when you're mucking around with friends as an adult and someone says, "Hey, I've got some let's set some tennis rackets." I have never once managed to make a tennis racket and a tennis ball make contact. My life.
So I was going to try to be comforting to say neither have I, but I also wasn't expected to learn it. So maybe that's.
But and then so that I knew I was dyslexic and dyspraxic, but the autism diagnosis was a massive surprise to me in my 30s, and that just changed everything, I think, about myself and my sense of myself. And that was and it was after that I started writing. So
So it was more like a moment of sort of, I don't know what to call it, like self-awareness, or sort of like it gave you permission somehow. So to go like, okay, that's what where I'm at. And
I don't quite know how it happened, but it just, the writing was just this kind of, I just suddenly felt I could do it. It wasn't until later I kind of realised, gosh, everything changed for me after the autism diagnosis. It wasn't kind of, but I think it was this kind of realising this is it was actually a kind of realising almost that kind of there was something wrong with me. I spent years with people telling me, no, don't be so stupid. That was the classic thing, constantly telling people, I think I feel really different to other people. I find it really hard. I somehow just don't think I'm quite the same as other people. And I spent years with people saying that, well, why do you think that? God, that's really sad that you feel that. Let's try and understand why you feel that. And then one day it turned out I'm autistic. And in fact, so I'm basically right. It's kind of, there is something that's different about me compared to the majority of the population. And that in some ways, it's not, in some ways it is, it was a bit like the dyspraxia and the tennis, it's not that I'm just really lazy and could never be bothered to work at tennis. It's that, trying to ask me to do, there are some things I can't do, and asking me to do them is like asking someone to fly. I cannot do it.
Yeah.
And no matter how much I work at it, I can't do it. And it was that kind of moment of revelation about various things that I think
kind of frees you
freed
a
me.
bit.
Yeah.
And a little bit self-affirming too, in that, okay, there is this different thing about me, but now I know it, and I can adjust for it and deal with it. I say that kind of in solidarity, because I just recently was also diagnosed as ADHD. I suspected it about myself, but knowing for sure, my biggest fear was that I was going to sit down in front of that doctor and she was going to say, no, you just need to try harder and stop being so lazy. But she said, oh yeah, no, that sounds really awful, and I'm sorry to hear that you're going through that. And just hearing that was like, oh, okay, well, that's a relief. Now I can do something.
Yes.
Yeah, so, yeah. I think I definitely understand how receiving that diagnosis kind of took the self-imposed chains off of your own creativity, and I'm really happy to hear that it's gone that way for you. I appreciate you being willing to talk about it as well.
Oh, I'm really, partly because I must talk about it, partly because this is still such kind of weird stigma about it, and I guess some people don't seem to believe it exists, or people get really, the number of times people have been like, oh, you don't look autistic, because you still get the kind of but you're wearing fashionable clothes, or but you're wearing makeup, like, well,
yeah.
But all autistic people clearly are sort of
unable to apply mascara. Actually, I find. Oh yeah.
I'm kind of wondering, how do you think, or do you think, like, that impacts the way you approach writing? Because your books aren't honestly like anything else. I can't point at another fantasy writer or even another writer really that sort of that you manage this mad cross between lyrical, visual, like you're tying in the story, and then your sentence structure. Like, I get it all, and it's completely insane. Like, to somebody who's like, sentence blocks, like, oh, keep it simple. It's like you just don't care about like, oh, this is how I'm supposed to do it. You're like, here's what's happening, and I'm gonna fucking shove it in your brain. I don't know how else to put that. It's like half poetry, half fantasy novel kind of thing. Is that sort of is that a conscious thing, or is that where's that coming from?
I think it is linked to my autism. I don't care. I genuinely don't care. And I mean, again, growing up with poets and things. So yeah, I mean, when I say, I grew up with people who are poets and playwrights, I don't mean commercial poetry. I was growing up with people who were writing really quite complicated avant-garde poetry and doing all kinds of weird stuff where, they're doing stuff for a pretty niche audience, and it is really weird and complicated, and it is just about them enjoying themselves, and if someone else likes it, that's it's like extreme music as well. It's kind of it's the sort of early Velvet Underground. This is not about gosh, I wonder if we can get to number one with this, guys. This was sort of was sort of really experimental industrial metal and stuff, which is oddly enough the kind of music I love. But no, it was so now I just really, really, really don't care. I mean, like, some of the stuff with the dripping bucket was just like, with In the Shadow of Their Dying, it really was like, how puerile, how low can I go? How puerile can I be here? And then I will just do stuff now where I'm like, I wonder if I could write an entire paragraph only basically using alliteration. I wonder if I could basically virtually every word in this paragraph I could have beginning with the same letter, because that would be fun. But obviously within the keeping, it's not like kind of within keeping the stuff within when I'm writing. But it's also, just that kind of, I just don't care. I don't care as long as I think. Yeah. But yeah, no, I think it's kind of, I've been thinking about this quite a lot. I don't know if when I say this, and every writer has this, or it is something special to me, but I see myself inside. I can see the whole book like I'm inside it, like it's a landscape around me, and I'm trying to transcribe it. And actually, I just realised years ago, I met a guy, when I was at this literature festival, friends around, I met this guy who had the world record for, he could recite pi to like 20,000 digits or something. He was one of those autistic savants who his thing was he could recite pi. And the way he did it was he didn't even need to close his eyes, but he could see himself standing in the landscape that was pi, the numbers of the digits of pi, and somehow being in this landscape, he could just recite it off, almost like me describing, like, I can see there's a picture behind you, Fletch, that says An End to Sorrow, Michael R Fletcher. He could somehow do that, without, obviously, he couldn't really see it because it was in his head, and he could. But it was somehow there. He could somehow be in it and almost like feel it as if he was in this number. And I think what he was saying is the same as I'm trying to say about the way I am in my prose, that somehow I'm inside it and I can see exactly with my eyes open. I can't see it, but I can kind of,
I do know what you mean.
I'm trying to write it down, and when it's working, it's just somehow coming out without me even being particularly conscious of it, just from this world I'm in or something. I'm trying. It's really, and I don't know whether that's how everybody experiences writing.
I do know what you mean. I find when a story has its hooks in me, scenes kind of populate themselves in my head, and I almost watch them.
It's not. I can see the scenes. It's that.
Oh, okay. So it's more the words.
It's the it's the language. It's not. I can see the words as words, but I can see the language.
So similar, but I guess
it's almost like I can see it on the page, but it's not that I can see it on the page. It's like I'm inside it.
Yeah.
Like the way this guy was talking about numbers. It's not that he could see like streams and streams of digits, but he was like inside the number.
Yeah.
So he could describe it in the same way I could describe your shirt, but not kind of. It's really difficult, but it does feel like I'm inside the world. Yeah. And I kind of...
Yeah, I do understand, I think.
Yeah, and it kind
of... It's just a familiarity with it just lives within
I know.
You,
it is this kind of visually... It is this kind of, I know everything. So I just... When I can't get it quite right, it's incredibly frustrating. I'm so angry with myself because I can't get the words quite right. And it's just, I know it's there and I can't get it down. But yeah, it's kind of... I'm also synesthetic. I'm pretty certain I'm synesthetic. So some of the kind of weird descriptions, I think, is because I have words that create really pleasant tastes in my mouth to hear or to say. And actually, one of the reasons I think I like the stuff I do is because I have synesthesia that's and it's almost like a form of, that, oh God, what's it called? When people like listening to the sound of people brushing their hair and
ASMR kind of stuff.
Yes. Yeah. I get something between that and synesthesia reading a military history. Something about all those terms about kind of, flanking position and echelons of troops. For some reason, that triggers my synesthesia massively, and it also triggers something like XR, and it always has done. So, so I read a huge amount of military history and love writing things like that because it kind of
You're just chasing that feeling of
tasty. Which is absolutely.
I can absolutely relate, and I wonder what that says about me as well, because just that feeling of sentences that are just so perfect, just like it's a very physical reaction that I find happens somewhere around the back of my neck or something, whether I've written it or somebody else has written it, and they kind of live somewhere in the folds of my brain for such a long time. And and I think it's why I personally hyper focus on certain writers, because certain writers can do it to me and then I just devour all of their work, and then I really struggle pivoting out of people who don't have that same rhythm, and I have to try to meet them where they're at, where yes, they don't make my brain itchy, but they're still very good at what they do. So I can relate, I think, in my own way.
Yeah. So Anna, when you're in the story like that, when you're sort of seeing it all, how far ahead are you thinking, or are you thinking about what's coming up next, or is it very much like an in the moment and just sort of rolling with it kind of thing?
Oh, so actually how I usually work is I start writing the whole book with one particular scene. So I start with an image, and it's usually a person in a landscape. So the whole thing, the Court of Broken Knives started with just this description of these people in the desert, and I could hear this man's voice very clearly, and these men in the desert. And at that point, and then so similarly, A Woman with the Sword just began with this image of a woman burying her husband. And at that point, I have no idea anything about anyone. I have no idea what we're doing here, what the setup is. It is like sort of, the first scene. It's like being a reader or watching a film. I have no idea what's going on here or why. And then things just begin to unfold. And then there comes a point when suddenly I can see everything, and I know exactly what everything is, and I know the whole purpose of the book, and I know, I do have this sense of I can see everything, and I can see the whole purpose of the book, and I can see how it ends, and what everything is about, and why the things I've been writing up to that point matter.
Do you find
but before that I have no idea what I'm doing at all. I have absolutely no idea about anything. But then it's not like it is quite frustrating, because then I'm still kind of groping my way around, like trying to put down into words this sense. It's not. It is sort of almost like it's kind of been loaded into my head, and now I'm sort of scrabbling around trying to get it down in words rather than trying to capture that impression. So so it's really painful. I just realised. The whole thing is painful, because at first it's just, I have no idea what's going on. I have no idea what I'm doing here. I have no idea what the point of this is. And then once I've had the huge revelation of everything, then it's like, oh my God, I can see it all, but I need to do it justice, and I can't. It's like life drawing or something. It is that sort of incredibly frustrating. Not that I can draw in the slightest, but the way I imagine life drawing would be, or trying to repeat back a song you've heard, where you're sort of, no, that's not quite right. That's not it. That note isn't quite the right note, or that kind of, the colour on that kind of little colour of that detail isn't quite right, and I can't get it. And it's so incredibly frustrating. I hate writing in some ways. It's really painful.
Keep waiting for the book where you're like, I've done enough of these. I know what I should just be confident that I will finish this and it will be okay. It's like,
no, it's always just no. So I suddenly realised it's a bit like university exams. It's that kind of horrible which I used to. I mean, I'm one of those people actually. I loved exams. I was good at exams. At the same time, that kind of, you have a certain amount of time, and you know what you've been drilled on the answer. You know what the answer is.
Yeah.
What is that? What other causes of the First World War? You know what this is. You've practiced this loads of times, but now suddenly you have to get it completely right in that certain amount of time and get it all down and make sure and be certain you haven't forgotten any points or you haven't, accidentally slightly misremembered the points or that kind of. It feels like that every time. It really does feel like an exam, or kind of every time with the kind of, have I got it all? Am I sure? And it's so painful. I hate doing it.
I find your experience is both comforting and horrifying in that it doesn't matter how qualified you are, you still have the imposter syndrome. But also, it doesn't matter how qualified you are. There's no getting rid of the imposter syndrome. It's not even
imposter syndrome. It's a kind of Actually, I was thinking it's more. It's more like endurance sports or something. I think, or exams. Yeah, it's that kind of like. I was just reading about this this guy who's just. It's like doing an Ironman challenge or something. Like 99% of my brain is like, why am I doing this? Like all those ultra runners. I haven't slept for 3 days. I've now run 150 kilometers. I haven't slept for 3 days. It's pouring with rain. Why am I doing this? And why do I do this? And then the next day I'm like, hey, let's do it again.
And then you pass the finish line, or you hit the. I remember, was it on the other podcast that you did, Fletcher, where you had
Wizards, Warriors, and Words? Yeah,
that one. Brian Stavley was on, I think, and he was making a similar analogy. Where was that with you, or am I misremembering?
Yep.
Yeah, and he was just saying, because he does run those extreme marathons, and he was saying, you do it to yourself and you regret it, and by the end you're crawling, but if you just crawl a little bit farther you'll make it, and you make it there to the top, and you kind of forget the suffering, but also you don't.
I enjoy the suffering. I loved exams.
Yeah,
I did enjoy, and I'm just in some ways that kind of, and actually because I do a lot of writing in my day job. I'm a civil servant, and we have lots of day job stuff where we're like kind of, they've asked us to get this turned around in half an hour. Can you do? And that kind of, I like that kind of. It is like my brain's like, whoa, this is what it means to be alive. Brain is like going at a billion miles an hour, and it's like, this is what it means to be alive, but it's just hell as well. This is why I'm so tired all the time.
A very common experience among the neurodiverse, as I'm coming to understand, where we really thrive on the chaos and the deadline, but also we really suffer with the chaos and the deadline.
All right, so we're hitting about 27 minutes. This is a good spot, I think, to wrap this one up. Thank you, Anna, for joining us, and we'll be back in some future episode to talk about other stuff with Anna. I think, as a podcast, there's shit we're supposed to do at the end of every episode.
Yeah.
Like, if you like the podcast and fucking like it.
Oh, yeah.
And, subscribe, because there's a button somewhere, but I don't know where it is.
You can pay us if you want on our Patreon, if you like that. I don't know.
We should do this probably once every 10 or 20 episodes.
Yeah.
And then that's about all we can do.
Definitely, absolutely buy all of Anna's books.
Yes, buy my books. Buy my books.
She deserves it. Yeah, exactly. She wrote one with Fletcher too. If you like him, you can throw him a bone, but mostly buy Anna's books.
Alrighty, that's a wrap. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much.
We'll see y'all later. Ciao.